Russian River.
Perfect.
Well, want to start the meeting? It's a few minutes past.
Yeah, I was just looking for my alphabetical roster.
Well, our faces are all on this thing, so.
Simon, do you do a little intro before I call the roll?
I'll do it after you call roll.
Okay, I'm going to do it alphabetically. Brinkerhoff,
Here.
Barney,
Here.
Gilliland,
Here,
Jones,
Here.
Gorham,
Here,
McCallum,
Here.
Miller,
here,
Najarice,
Here.
I am here. Silva Khan. Madeline not here. I think she may have sent an email saying she couldn't make it.
Yes.
Smith? Roger?
that's true.
Is Roger not with us?
he's here. I think your audio may be muted.
Your audio is not working, Roger. You're unmuted, but it still isn't coming through.
Yeah. We can see your mouth moving.
Pda, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes.
I have many
Tell me your
microphone
presence.
choices. I'm here.
All right. Simon?
Yes, so good evening, everyone. This meeting is being held virtually and viewers are welcome to provide public comment online or by telephone at 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 816-4120-8163. If you're watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the participants icon and select raise hand. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens a public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that you've been unmuted and you have 2 minutes to speak. Currently, we have Danielle O'Leary, our Director of Economic Development. She's one of our attendees. We'll kind of switch over for her a little bit later, but aside from her, we don't have anyone from the public attending right now.
Okay, first agenda item is approval of the November 5 notes. Simon has distributed those. Any comments on those notes? Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move.
In a second.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next agenda item is public comment on non-agenda items. Since there are no members of the public here, then we'll pass that. And the next presentation is the star of our show, Paul Jensen. He's going to tell us about priority development areas. Paul?
Good evening, everyone. I don't think I've been to a CAC meeting in several years. I think the last time I attended one of these meetings was to report out on housing legislation. So it's nice to be here tonight. And Simon, if I could ask you to open the PowerPoint that I've prepared. And I'm also going to ask you to navigate my slides, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm on an iPad. And frankly, I'm technologically challenged when it comes to iPad technology with Zoom. So I can't, that's about it.
No problem, my pleasure. I'm sharing the screen right now. Can everyone see it?
Yeah, it's loaded. There we go.
There it is.
There it is.
Great.
Great. Do you want to go to the slideshow mode and then I'll just start with that?
Yeah, let's see.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Slideshow. Oh.
There we go. Okay, good. All right, well, if you could move on to the second slide, that would be great. Start with that. The first thing I want to say is that in terms of purpose, a priority development area, which is also called a PDA, is a planning and financial tool, which I will explain in a few minutes. But in terms of place, it's a geographic area that is close to, along, or within transit modes and connections that can be earmarked for concentrated growth, particularly housing growth. And it's usually a place that has convenient public transit service that is prioritized by local governments like the city of San Rafael for housing, jobs, and services. And they're usually located in settings that could vary from a downtown to Main Street and aging shopping centers. Could you move on to the second slide, please?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Now, what I want to do is I want to start with a little history in the origin of PDAs because it's really rooted in state legislation associated with greenhouse gas emissions. Back in 2006, the governor signed Assembly Bill 32, and that was a mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to specific target levels. And this was to be administered statewide. And as a result of AB 32, as a follow-up bill, Senate Bill 375 was signed by the governor in 2008. And this was intended to implement AB 32. And what it requires is that every region in the state is required to develop and adopt what's called a sustainable communities strategy. Essentially, this is a strategy on how each region in the state of California is going to achieve reducing their greenhouse gas emissions per the targets of Assembly Bill 32. The primary contributor to greenhouse gas emissions is fossil fueled vehicles, and greenhouse gas emissions are exacerbated by our historic pattern of building outward into the undeveloped areas, which is called Greenfield Development. Essentially, what this does is it increases the job to work trips and commuter congestion. Greenfield development that we see it today is typically development occurs now in East Contra Costa County, Solano County, and portions of Sonoma County. And these folks, commute into Marin County for jobs and then return to their homes in these outer areas. The greatest effort to reach the GHG or greenhouse gas emission reduction targets is to reduce the amount of vehicle miles that are traveled by planning for more jobs and housing that are concentrated in the urban developed areas around or near transit. And this is really the goal of a sustainable community strategy. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, each region is required to adopt or prepare and adopt a sustainable community strategy. The regional planning agencies that are responsible for this plan in the Bay Area are ABAG, or the Association of Bay Area Governments, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC. And several years ago, these two agencies actually combined. What they prepared in 2013 was what is called Plan Bay Area. Many of you may have heard of Plan Bay Area. It is our regional plan, and it is our regional SCS, or Sustainable Community Strategy. And probably the most key tool in the Plan Bay Area for reducing greenhouse gas emissions is what's called the Priority Development Area, which, as I mentioned, is a planning and funding tool. PDAs were initially defined as a 1/2 mile radius around rail stations or major transit stops, and local jurisdictions throughout the region were offered to nominate their area for PDA. This is not a mandate by the state of California. It's not a mandate by the region. It's very discretionary. Each local jurisdiction has the ability to nominate certain areas for a priority development area. And then what Plan Bay Area does is it assigns a higher percentage of jobs and housing growth to those nominated PDAs, or priority development areas. I want to make it clear that this is not a mandate, but it's kind of expected that there's going to be an increased amount of jobs and housing within that geographic area. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Simon?
Yes.
So San Rafael took advantage of the first generation of PDA in 2009. We nominated 2 areas at the time. SMART was not in operation, but it was, planned for operations. So we designated the two PDAs for our 2 SMART stations, and the Civic Center area and downtown. And again, at the time, that was a 1/2 mile radius around those 2 stations. And what this status did was it made those 2 areas eligible for planning grants. And that is basically money to plan for these areas for additional growth for both jobs and housing. And we prepared and received grants for a downtown and a civic center station area plan. In fact, the Citizens Advisory Committee was essentially the advisory committee that led the charge on the downtown station area plan way back from 2009 to 2013, when it was ultimately adopted. And we prepared those 2 station area plans, which, by the way, are what we call vision documents. They're not like actual changes to our general plan. They're basically a list of to-do tasks to make changes to our general plan and zoning. The Civic Center PDA was rescinded in 2013. It was very controversial, and so the city chose to rescind that PDA. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Simon? And this is the original 1/2 mile circle around what was the Civic Center priority development area in North San Rafael. You can move on to the next slide, please. So the downtown priority development area was retained, of course, and it continued to be eligible for access to funding. And we had a great opportunity to pursue grant funding when we started our General Plan 2040, which the CAC is familiar with. What we decided to do is, since we have a priority development area in our downtown area, and we see that as an opportunity of where we want to put growth, particularly housing in our community, we took advantage of the PDA status, and we applied for a One Bay Area grant for our downtown in 2018 to fund our downtown precise plan. And if you may recall, the downtown precise plan is a more granular plan for our downtown area under the blanket of our General Plan 2040, and you'll be given a presentation on our downtown precise plan in an upcoming meeting. The grant funded this precise plan, which is now a part of our General Plan 2040. Can you move on to the next slide, please? What we were allowed to do, this is our downtown area and the boundaries of our downtown precise plan. We convinced ABAG and MTC that the 1/2 mile circle wasn't practical for planning our downtown, because our downtown is a grid pattern that's very lineal. So they agreed that the grant funding would cover areas that go beyond that 1/2 mile circle, which includes our West End area and portions of Montecito that are east of Grand Avenue. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Now, there's been some recent PDA actions by San Rafael. As I mentioned, Plan Bay Area is updated every 4 years, and Plan Bay Area 2050 has been initiated. This year, they launched a letter of interest for new PDAs. Right now, like I mentioned, we just have one in San Rafael, which is our downtown. The only other priority development area that is, I wouldn't call it a true priority development area, but it is one under a Plan Bay Area, is in Marin City. And what we did was we thought that we would take advantage of this opportunity to apply for 2 new priority development areas to incorporate into our general plan 2040. One is for the Northgate area, and this is not the old Civic Center priority development area, 1/2 mile circle around the SMART station, but it's more of a refined boundary, primarily because there's community interest in doing a specific plan that primarily focuses on the Northgate Mall. We had a very similar interest in the southeast San Rafael area, primarily the Canal area, to do a specific plan. So we chose to, and the city council approved, a nomination for 2 new priority development areas for these areas earlier this year, which, by the way, have been approved by ABAG and MTC. And that provides us an opportunity to program to prepare specific plans for these 2 areas in our general plan 2040. And the funding, if the funding is issued, we have to prepare specific plans for these 2 areas by 2025. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So these are the 2 new priority development areas that have been designated in San Rafael. On the left is basically the Northgate area. It encompasses the Northgate Mall, Northgate 1, Northgate 3, and properties that pretty much are around the Freitas Parkway interchange. And then on the right is the southeast San Rafael and Canal priority development area. This is a very large priority development area because it encompasses not only the Canal neighborhood, but a good portion of I-580 and the 101 interchange, as well as our largest commerce area in Marin County, which is most of the light industrial area of Woodland Avenue, Anderson Drive, Francisco Boulevard East, etc. And the reason why this priority development area is so broad is that there's a lot of issues to plan for in this area, not only for housing, but for sea level rise and for commerce. So that was very strategic when we created those boundaries. Next slide, please. So I just want to report out, there has been a change in what a priority development area is since 2013, when we rescinded the priority development area in the North San Rafael area. As I mentioned, they were originally identified as a 1/2 mile circle around a transit center or a rail station. Now the definition of a PDA has been broadened. They can be configured based on local jurisdiction input, which is what you see in both our Northgate area and our southeast San Rafael area. The key point is that they're near areas of public transit. The reason why that we've pursued these new PDAs is we're in a housing crisis, and we see some of these areas as additional opportunities for increased housing in those areas, and it will help with our next RHNA cycle, which is the regional housing need allocation, which is another discussion, by the way, that is mandated by the state of California, where we are required to zone for properties for housing. And our allocation that has been assigned to San Rafael is likely to triple under our compared to what we have right now. So we see this opportunity to consider housing in some of these other areas. I also want to mention that identifying these PDAs does not prejudice our general plan 2040, because it's really primarily a planning tool and a funding tool. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you some important facts before I finish this out. As I mentioned, Plan Bay Area, which is a regional plan, is updated every 4 years. And Plan Bay Area cannot impact local control. It holds no authority over local zoning or development actions by the local jurisdiction. I mention this because this was part of the controversy of the PDA in North San Rafael a dozen years ago, is there was a lot of concern that regional government and state government was coming in and imposing their control on local jurisdictions. And that is really not the case. The PDA is a funding tool, as I mentioned, and a planning tool. It would not impact local zoning or land use authority. We have no obligation to meet or zone for the growth estimates that Plan Bay Area assigns to these PDAs. And then again, it bears no relationship to or impacts our regional housing need allocation, other than it gives us an opportunity to look at these areas to see where or if we can add housing in those areas to meet our RHNA. Next slide, please. Now, I'm offering up a couple of websites for reference, primarily because both of these have a really good list of frequently asked questions on what PDAs are, what they do, their purpose, where they stand legally. So I wanted to make sure that you had these websites so that you can go to them and take a look at the frequently asked questions. We actually referred to both these websites. We created a website at the local level when we brought forward the two PDAs earlier this year for the North San Rafael and the Southeast San Rafael area. So with that, I'm going to close with, if you have some questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have one. Your slide, you said that the funding and planning would have to be completed by 2025. Is there a chance it would be completed sooner, or if projects came up for development, would they be put on hold because we were waiting on finishing a plan or anything like that?
Those are two questions, and they're both very good, and they came up during our process of designating these two recent PDAs. The first is that, yes, we have to complete a specific plan or a precise plan if we get funding by year 2025. What we've done in our General Plan 2040 is we've programmed to prepare specific plans for the two new PDA areas, and we've identified them as a high priority program, meaning that we should tackle those projects as soon as possible. I do want to let you know that the One Bay Area Grant Program, which is the primary grant program that provides the funding for a specific plan, like the one we're doing in downtown, which we're calling the Downtown Precise Plan, they offer a call for grant applications every 2 years. They were going to call for one here in November last month, but because of the pandemic, that's been postponed to the spring. But we have every intention of applying for a grant when it becomes available for these two areas, so that we can jump on this and get that process started and hopefully get through by 2025. So that's the first question. And then the second question, if you could repeat what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to put them in one question too.
No, it's okay.
If projects come up for development in those areas, are we going to have to hold until the planning is complete?
That's a really good question. And the answer is no, unless the city council were to decide to impose a moratorium. They would have to have good cause to impose a moratorium. So for example, this question came up at the Northgate during the discussion of the Northgate PDA, because there's a lot of interest in Northgate Mall, particularly for a Costco at the Northgate Mall. And that application came and went. There is a possibility it could surface again. And the community was saying, well, gee, can we basically tell the Northgate Mall developer or property owner to, can we basically tell them they can't process their application, or you can't approve a project during this specific plan process? We cannot do that unless the city council were to make specific findings for a moratorium. So that's basically how it works. And I could tell you, the only time I've seen that done is in 1986, when we did the General Plan 2000. We were sued because of the inadequacy of our general plan prior to 1986. And so the city council imposed a moratorium and said, okay, staff, we want you to prepare a general plan update, and you have 1 year. We're going to freeze all application processing for 1 year because we know how important this general plan is, and we are obviously have a lawsuit hanging over our head. That's the only time I've that done. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Paul, this is Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, see you.
Good to see you too. Given the congestion in the Canal area with housing already and the poor quality of a lot of that housing, how do you envision this helping the housing situation there?
Great. Well, if we do a specific plan for the area and we get funding for a specific plan, what we can look at is, one, the existing housing stock and ensuring that we protect the existing housing stock, and two, looking at opportunities for new housing in that area. Now, there are other challenges in that area that we have to consider. One is sea level rise, which is, a big issue in the Southeast San Rafael area. And the funding provides us an opportunity that if we prepare a specific plan, we can look at all of that collectively. So, but there is a concern about the loss of housing, particularly affordable housing in that area. And this might provide an opportunity to take a look at how we can preserve that.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul, I was curious, the RENA requirements are binding on the city, if I understand them correctly.
Right.
What are the teeth in them? I mean, in the sense that it seems like they're saying, oh, show us where you can put a lot more housing. I think we had a hard enough time in the last general plan showing where we could provide enough housing for those requirements. Now we're being asked to show even more housing opportunities.
That's right.
So, but it wasn't as binding last time.
Actually, Roger, RENA has always been a mandate. It's separate from priority development areas, et cetera. It's always been a mandate since the 1980s, but the bar has been risen, or the bar has been raised over the years. It used to be all you had to do was zone property and provide an inventory of properties to show that you've demonstrated that you've zoned for housing to meet that number. Now the bar is you have to build that housing. And, we as a public agency don't build housing. We can provide the tools and set the table to make sure the property is zoned for housing, and that we have a process that makes it easy to get housing approved, but we don't control that market. So that's a very high bar. And so the best thing we can do is to find areas where we can increase the housing stock. In downtown, this downtown precise plan, which was funded by an OBAG grant because it is a PDA, provides us an opportunity to boost those numbers. By the way, our regional housing need allocation, or RENA, is expected to jump almost 3 times in this next cycle. So this downtown plan is looking at hopefully accommodating an additional 2,000 housing units, which is a good bite into that RENA obligation.
On the assumption that other communities are struggling with this as well, it seems like the RENA requirements are sort of doomed to fail, just because nobody's going to do it. What's going on with that? I mean, is that right, or is that way off?
No, it's not way off. It's spot on. And in fact, there is a group, again, Association of Bay Area Governments, who administers the Plan Bay Area and the priority development area process, is also responsible for distributing the RENA. The RENA comes from the state of California down to the region, and it's one big number of housing units that we're supposed to plan for. And then it's distributed to all the counties and the cities and towns in the Bay Area. And there's a special methodology that's used on how that's distributed. And the methodology is very complicated. And to be honest with you, this latest methodology that employed, which has been caused for all these numbers to jump to triple levels under our current conditions, is a bit daunting. And I mean, you think it may be a challenge for us, but other communities in Marin who don't have the land area or the opportunities to provide newer or additional housing are being given numbers that are completely unreasonable. So I expect that through this process, this RHNA process in the next year, some of that's going to get adjusted downward. One good example is the city of Belvedere. Now, I don't feel sorry for Belvedere because I don't think that they provide affordable housing, but they've been given in this latest RHNA allocation a RHNA number of 180 units. There's no way you're going to add 180 units in Belvedere unless they're accessory dwelling units, and even that's a challenge. So it's likely that some of that methodology is going to get adjusted and some of those numbers are going to come down. The best thing we can do is try to plan for what we know we can do, particularly in our downtown area right now. So.
And are the RHNA requirements just to identify housing, like places that housing could be developed, or is it to actually build the units? Sorry, I'm not super up to
yeah,
date.
originally started as the local jurisdictions are required to zone for enough units to meet that RHNA. And if you look at our housing, this is all embedded in our housing element in the general plan. And the housing element is updated every year, every 8 years. So we get a new RHNA number every 8 years from the state of California. But essentially, like I said, what it started with was you had to basically demonstrate that you've zoned for that number. But now, in order for you to meet those requirements, you have to demonstrate that they've been built. And a lot of communities are having problems with that. And I'm going to give you an example for us. In the last 2 years, we've approved well over 300 housing units. But last year, we may have built probably less than 30. And most of those were accessory dwelling units. We've got one big project under construction that's a big bite for housing. Wow, 41 units at the corner of 2nd and B Street, which is fortunately under construction. But we won't get, because of the way the laws have been updated, we won't get credit for any of those 300 units until they're built and occupied. So that, like I said, that's a tall order.
So what,
Paul,
just so I'm curious, Paul, what you predict is going to happen here? Because clearly it's not just Marin communities, but there are probably communities all across the state that are kind of going, this is stupid. We can't do this.
Yeah.
We're not going to do this. Our citizens won't stand for it. A whole variety of, we can't build units if the market doesn't allow us to build units. I mean, you can give land away and you still can't build units under certain circumstances. So what's likely to happen?
I don't know at this point, to be honest with you. Like I said, it's a challenge. And all I know is what I've seen, there's been some blatant the one community that I know that the state has gone after is the city of Huntington Beach. The state of California has sued Huntington Beach because they refused to update their housing element to meet their RHNA. So, that's the hammer that we see. There's also state housing legislation, which includes some other hammers, which are financial, like fines. But, you know, I haven't seen any of that realized at this point.
So Paul, getting back to PDAs, I'm curious about how how the planning that may grow out of these will be translated into code. And you know, I'd like you maybe to reference the Civic Center station area plan, that although the PDA was rescinded, the plan was adopted.
Right.
At the same meeting, as I remember.
Right.
And so that conceptual plan has been sitting there for 10 years or so, has not been codified to my knowledge. Wondering if it is, and I should know this, but I don't. Are portions of that being codified in General Plan 2040? And do we have to wait that long to get something codified?
Well, yeah. Like I said, the two station area plans that were done in 2012 were vision documents, so they weren't actual changes to our general plan. However, we made a commitment, particularly with the Civic Center area, what remained in place after the PDA was rescinded in that Civic Center station area plan has actually been folded into our general plan 2040. So we have certain, for example, there were certain recommendations for properties on the west side of 101 in the North San Rafael area, like Northgate 3 across from Northgate Mall, where we have folded in those recommendations from that station area plan into the general plan 2040. So they're making it into the general plan. The one good thing about downtown is the fact that by doing a precise plan, we're actually taking we're not only folding the station area plan into that precise plan and the general plan, we're creating a whole zoning ordinance for downtown as part of that precise plan effort, because it's one big package. So I feel good that we at least got that far with downtown.
Yeah, okay, well, I appreciate that. I didn't know that about the Civic Center. Just fast forwarding though on the two new PDAs that you're talking about tonight, how do you connect, you know, those planning efforts to an actual general plan? Because you're not going to have another general plan amendment and EIR and all that stuff happening for another, what, 20 years?
Correct. No, but the general plan 2040 will recommend specific plans for both of those areas as a program. It already has. And so what we plan on doing is, if we do a specific plan for those two areas, they will not be like the station area plans where they're a vision document that maybe sits on a shelf. They will be like the downtown precise plan, which will be embedded in the general plan and likely will include some zoning parameters. So yes, we can do that during that the forecasted period of the general plan. And what will happen is, if there's any amendments that need to be made to the general plan to reflect what comes out of the specific plan process, they will be done as part of that effort.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Paul, I've got a question. Maybe I'm missing some of the points here, but I am a little confused by the interaction between the PDAs in the general plan. And what I'm taking away is that when the general plan 2040 is completed, is wrapped up, it'll sort of have provisions in it that a specific plan for Southeast San Rafael will be prepared, but then that will be a follow-on. In other words, do I correctly understand that the general plan will say, yes, we are going to put together specific plans for these PDA areas, but then those specific plans will be a later project following on from the general plan? Is that the sequence of events?
That's the sequence of events. You're correct, Bill. And as mentioned earlier, if we get funding to prepare those plans through the One Bay Area Grant Program, we have to prepare them by year 2025. The PDA is not really a planning designation in our general plan. It's merely a planning and funding tool that allows us to put in our general plan that we want to earmark these 2 areas for specific plans, and that we will program preparation of those specific plans. And so I just want to make it clear on that. So, because the PDA really doesn't have any regulation tied to it like our general plan would.
And I've got a sort of a cluster of questions based on what you just said. First of all, you made the point that a PDA is a funding tool and a planning tool. What I've heard so far by way of funding is, let me ask, I'll do what lawyers are not allowed to do. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions and then let you move around among them because they're all related, I think. What I'm hearing about funding is that the PDA provides access to funds for preparation of precise plans and specific plans. Is there other kinds of funding that is opened up by the approved designation of a PDA? That's my first question. And if so, what other kinds of funding might there be? Or is the funding just, well, the state's going to provide money for the project of putting together specific plans and precise plans? And the second thing that puzzles me a little bit is you've said that a PDA is not an imposition on local control of planning and zoning and land use, but referred to the PDA as a planning tool. And I assume that that's a very preliminary kind of a tool in the sense that all it does is say, well, okay, we're going to do some planning. That is, the local agencies can now do some planning within this area by way of a specific plan or a precise plan. Is that the sense in which it's a planning tool?
That's
now
correct.
I'll shut up. Okay.
That's absolutely correct. There is no teeth in the Plan Bay area or a PDA designation that says, okay, you're going to have to put this many housing units in the PDA area or this many jobs. There is an expectation that if you designate a PDA area, that you're probably going to increase housing and job opportunities in that area, but there's no mandate to say that you must meet certain numbers, okay? So that's the planning tool. You're correct in the fundamental sense that it's just it's an area where it's expected some additional growth is going to happen. Now, with regard to the other funding sources, I haven't seen anything else at this point other than the One Bay Area grant that's linked to a PDA designation, but there are likely some other funds available. I mean, we just applied for, I think, a Proposition 68 grant, which deals with sustainability in the Southeast San Rafael area. And I would expect that just by virtue of the fact that we are going to do a specific plan for that area, because that's we've identified in our general plan, that might be something that makes us a little more attractive to be able to get funding from other sources.
And then actually, I'll dominate the conversation just for a little bit longer by asking one other question, which is, I think like all of us, when I fail at something, I try to take away at least a lesson from it. Are there lessons that were taken away from the inability to go forward with the Civic Center plan, other than maybe the usual subjects will show up to oppose anything?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson was not for the city of San Rafael, but for the Association of Bay Area Governments and MTC, is that the original Plan Bay Area politically backfired by a lot of community members because of the concern over regional government coming in and trying to impose local control. And they've done a good job in the subsequent generations of Plan Bay Area to diffuse a lot of that concern. And that is one of the reasons why they've made some changes to priority development areas. Like I said, originally it was a half-mile circle around a train station and an expectation that you were going to put so much housing and so much jobs within that area. They've loosened a lot of that up to basically said, listen, we are not here to tell you what to do in these areas. We're just saying that you've got these areas that are around transit. If you designate these areas, you'll be eligible for funding, and you can be much at a local level. You can be very flexible on how those boundaries are set up. So I think those lessons were learned really more at the regional level rather than our level.
I'd like to make sure at this point that everybody gets a chance to ask questions or make comments. And I'm just going to kind of randomly ask. Joe, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything. Just listening. It's good.
Gladys, anything that you wanted to ask about or comment on with regard to the PDAs?
I had one and then it just went away. I'll catch you later.
Okay. Is Madeline with us today? I think she, I guess she's not here.
Not in attendance tonight.
Andy?
Yeah, I have two questions. Thanks, Paul, for the presentation. So my first question is, in terms of the PDA process, I want to understand how that overlaps with planning for housing for the homeless, and how that fits in and thinking about transitional or supportive housing. And kind of a spin-off of that would be in terms of the Project Home Key initiative with converting or buying hotels to house the homeless with one potential site on Kerner. Just kind of curious how that all fits together, if you can talk about that.
Okay, first of all, there's no connection whatsoever, none. And while it would be nice, there is no connection between Home Key and a PDA designation. I think ultimately when or if we do a specific plan for that area, it might be a great opportunity to look at opportunities for homeless, for housing for homeless, but there's no connection with the PDA.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a missed opportunity. I think it would be really important to address. And then kind of just another question. So in the staff report, it was described that in meeting with representatives from the Canal, there was general support for the PDA in the Canal area. But in meeting with representatives from North San Rafael, there were a good number of questions and concerns. And I'm just kind of curious, if you can elaborate a little bit about who are these representatives, what concerns they're expressing, because, from my experience in many of the community groups that I've talked with, they're very supportive of the PDA process in North San Rafael. So I'm just trying to understand why other perspectives are not being reflected.
Okay. Well, first of all, in terms of the Southeast San Rafael and Canal neighborhood, the stakeholders that we were primarily working with was the Canal Alliance and also the East San Rafael Working Group. I don't know if you're familiar with the East San Rafael Working Group. They're basically blanketed under the Chamber of Commerce, and they represent the major property owners and businesses in the Southeast San Rafael area, which of course has the highest concentration of those types of services and businesses in Marin County. And they were very supportive of this. We got no pushback at all from that area for doing a priority development area. Moving on to North San Rafael, yes, we had a small group of folks, which were the same people that expressed concern and skepticism about the PDA 10 years ago, that surfaced again, because again, they were concerned about the regional government coming in and imposing expectations on us that we were required to implement. But we also worked with a handful of groups. Probably the biggest group in the North San Rafael area that we worked with was a group called the Regional Growth, Responsible Growth Marin. And these folks represent a handful of people from the neighborhood organizations in the Terra Linda area. And they're primarily concerned about the life of Northgate Mall and the fact that Northgate Mall, like many malls, is going through transition, potentially, a slow death because of the way that people purchase now and frequent retail. But also recognize the need for the Northgate Mall as a housing opportunity and also a concern over Costco. But at the end of the day, this particular group was very supportive of the PDA designation, primarily because of the opportunity to look at doing a specific plan for that area, which allows for a holistic approach at looking at housing and retail and the future of Northgate Mall. So yeah, there were two factions in Marin, but it was mostly Responsible Growth Marin that supported the PDA.
Gladys, did you want us to come back to you?
No, no, not right now. I'm getting my answer.
Okay.
Andy raises a good point about the homeless, but that's more of a general plan. That kind of policy making belongs in the general plan, doesn't it? Or where does that belong?
Yeah, actually it belongs not only in the general plan, but primarily in our housing element, because we have to plan for housing. Homeless housing falls in the category of extremely low income. And part of our RENA obligation is to meet certain extremely low income numbers. So the Home Key project at 3301 Kerner is going to be, and the 190 Mill Street project, which is homeward bound, is going to be a big boost at us meeting our RENA numbers for extremely low income housing. And so that's where it would fall. And obviously the housing element's part of the general plan.
But correct me, well, you or Bill can correct me if I'm wrong, but our general plan, my opinion all along has been light on discussing the homeless and their impact on San Rafael and their needs and everything that goes along with that topic.
Yeah, I don't think I can argue with you about that. I can tell you this, Roger, is that we have to update, and by the way, part of the general plan update, although the housing element is part of our general plan, that is the one element that's not being updated as part of the general plan 2040, because that will be updated separately with this new RENA allocation. And so I'm assuming it's going to be, the homeless housing discussion, at least in terms of the housing piece, is going to be obviously considered strongly as part of that effort. But we have policies in other sections of our general dealing with homelessness, but it's not like there isn't a huge plan to deal with homelessness. So you're right.
I wonder, Paul, if with that housing element coming up in the next year or two, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a possibility, and I guess I would suggest that a portion of the steering committee of the general plan could be carried over into the development of that housing plan and maybe not lose the kind of, institutional memory that Roger and others bring to that discussion, so that the issue wouldn't be lost when that portion of the general plan is considered.
That's a great idea, Bill. I really like that, because even though our last housing element update was pretty uneventful, the last time we updated our housing element, we did it simultaneously with adopting a sustainability element and embedding our climate change action plan into our general plan. And that was back in 2011. But I like the idea of some sort of a committee input into that, primarily because we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and look at housing opportunities. And I think it's going to be real helpful to have community input at sort of a committee level that will help guide that. So just keep that thought. I may not be around when this is initiated.
Well,
Oh,
that worries me. Yeah, a
I'll say
lot.
it goes in every business at City Hall, but I think it's a great idea that that should be forgotten.
And alternatively, maybe the CAC could serve that function.
Paul,
Possibly.
Paul, when would the housing element and reflecting the new RENA numbers be updated? What's the scheduled timing for that?
Well, Joe, what they're doing right now is, like I mentioned earlier, they just completed a run of the recent methodology on how the numbers are distributed. And so I expect, and the number that we got for San Rafael is about 2,700 units that we have to identify in our general plan. And in our downtown precise plan, eventually, of course, we have, like I mentioned, we have a good number of the units identified in our downtown precise plan. But I would expect in the spring, we're probably going to have to start working on our general plan update, because we have to get it adopted by the end of 2022. So, and we need a good year or so to prepare it and obviously include public input and things of that nature. So I expect in the spring, we're probably going to get a formal number on what our RENA is. And that's when we're going to jumpstart this. I do like the idea of the, a committee, possibly the CAC, being a part of that effort.
Paul, you were saying that the two, I thought I heard you saying that the two were different, the general plan and the housing element. Are they going to be together? Because I can see problems with getting all of it done and then having to go back with probably EIRs and all kinds of other stuff to talk about the housing element.
Okay, well, the housing element, there are 9 required elements that the state requires for your general plan, and one of them is a housing element. Unfortunately, the housing element, it's the only element in the general plan that is required to be updated every 8 years, okay? And the cycle, that 8-year cycle was not right for us to address in this general plan update. So what's gonna happen is that when we open up the housing element and we update it, we're probably gonna have to update the general plan to reflect that when the time comes. So yeah, they go hand in hand in a lot of ways. It's just that unfortunately, because the housing element has a different cycle for update, it just didn't work with the timing of our general plan update. So, but I would expect that, when we do that general plan or the housing element update, there might be elements of our general plan that we may have to update to reflect the new housing element.
Right. And in terms of enforcement, in the past, I think if your housing element didn't pass muster, you were not allowed to approve any development of any kind until it did, right?
Well, something like that. And we've never been put in that position. I'm knocking on wood here. But the town of Corte Madera was sued several times because they had an inadequate housing element, and it forced their hand on a lot of things. And I don't want to say this because they may not be totally correct, but the Wind Cup project was a result of, okay, we need to put all our eggs in one basket. And that's why you got this big project on one site next to the freeway.
Right.
In order to meet their housing element requirement. But yes, you're right. And we are vulnerable to litigation. We are also vulnerable to the state of California Housing and Community Development to basically rescind their certification of our housing element, which does not put us in good standing. But the bar has been raised, as I mentioned earlier. The bar's been raised where not only do we have to zone for it, but we have to demonstrate the housing's been built. Non-compliance with the housing element can also result in fines. Some of the many housing laws that were passed in the last couple of years included one or two that basically adopted fines for blatant non-compliance with the state guidelines. So, and I don't see us being put in that position because we're doing, we do a pretty good effort for Marin County and making sure that we try to comply, but that threat's still out there.
Paul, I've got just a very quick question, hopefully. I guess Golden Gate Transit is still considering 3 or 4 different sites for or configurations for the transit center. I'm wondering how that degree of uncertainty is impacting our downtown precise plan, and if at all, or whether we're waiting for them to come up with their preferred configuration, or what the story is on that.
Great. I'm smiling because we've been waiting too. Here, in fact, you guys, I think, are scheduled to get a presentation on the downtown precise plan in an upcoming meeting. I know it was supposed to happen tonight, but it's not ready for prime time quite yet. We're expecting to release that plan in the next couple of weeks. And this is how we have handled the transit center relocation project. And that is because there are 3 sites, by the way, that they're looking at. The block between 4th and 3rd, that includes the Whistle Stop property and some property across the street from Whistle Stop. The block from 4th to 5th, and then another alternative under the freeway between 4th and 5th. The way that we're structuring our downtown precise plan, because we don't have control over the ultimate location of that plan in terms of the planning process right now, that control is held by the Bridge District. We've identified a zone in our precise plan where these 3 site options are located, and basically say, these are the 3 site options within this zone. It could occur in one of these 3 areas. And then when that decision's made, we're likely going to have to come back and basically codify that in the downtown precise plan. So unfortunately, the timing's not perfect, but that's the best way we feel like we're going to handle it. And what we've done is that there are some contingencies in the plan that if, let's say, it's not located on this site, then what is the land use regulations for that area? And we're making some assumptions in the plan based on the fact that if, let's say, site A and B are not selected, this is what's going to be the land use for that area. So that, like I said, that's the best way we can handle this right now.
Right. I don't think there's much else you can do, although it's likely that the current site for the transit center is not going to be used as a transit center anymore. So that would be one site that could definitely be, rezoned at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's a great opportunity site because it's right next to SMART. And one of the things that's being recommended in the precise plan is basically extending the downtown parking district east to Heatherton. So we're going to have to look at parking opportunities, east of Lincoln Avenue. And that's one site where there's a possibility for additional parking.
Okay, so Bill, my apologies. We have had some electrical issues here at my house that we shorted out. I just wanted to go back to the discussion we were having about the canal, and I continue to be terribly concerned that between the new Homeward Bound site, the Kerner site, and other discussions we're having about that area, is it seems to be we continue to talk about it as being the area we want to house our homeless population. And I think that's going to do nothing but continue to leave that being a very, just a site for an area that is not a place others are going to want to be, for lack of a better term. That's not a very articulate way of putting it. But I'm very concerned that this plan that we're looking at is not considering what we can do to make that area a more opportunistic area of San Rafael.
So Katie, did you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Paul.
Well, first of all, the Homeward Bound project, Homeward Bound already exists at 190 Mill Street. They've had that facility since 1985. We all know that. They added permanent housing, which is a wonderful addition to their existing emergency shelter. The Project Home Key at 3301 Kerner basically kind of fell in our lap. And so it's not like, we planned for that to be there. That fell in our lap. It was an opportunity. And the city agreed that, we should do that there. Unfortunately, other communities in Marin have not embraced this particular thing.
Paul, let me just stop you. I completely understand. I just want to say going forward that we look at other opportunities to enhance that area.
Hey, you know what? Keep that thought when we do a specific plan for the East San Rafael area. If we're so lucky as to get money to do that plan, that should be part of the goals that you bring forward.
That point may bring up a sort of a conundrum for planning that area, which is that you do a specific plan for that particular area. What Katie's talking about really is diversifying the housing possibilities elsewhere outside of that area by maybe moving some of the low income housing that's there. I mean, population is there to be more widespread in other parts of the city. So, I think that needs to be factored in, that this is not an area that can be planned in isolation from other areas. And, my pet thing is the sea level rise threat down there. And I see, okay, we've got the most vulnerable, largest community of vulnerable population in the county, probably. And we've got the most severe sea level rise threat. If we keep building and impacting more and more affordable housing in that area, we're just going to lose it going forward. So how do we diversify that? How do we plan long range? And I guess I'll try to make this a precise question for you. How do you integrate, the adaptation plan for sea level rise and other climate impacts that is called for in the general plan with the PDA process to make sure those two things are really knitted together?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is I think, obviously we're going to have to look at this holistically in that whole area. And a specific plan has got to look at all of those topic areas and see how we're going to deal with this. But I don't have any one answer right now. I mean, we have some thoughts, as you know, Bill, about opportunities for sea level rise adaptation in that area. But, those are big tasks and a tall order. And, it may be that, we decide that, perhaps we shouldn't add any more high density housing in that neighborhood, primarily because of that reason. But I think that would have to be vetted as part of that specific plan process. We can't prejudge that now.
Yeah, and I should have added housing to that litany
No,
also.
I don't mean to sound like I've worked for San Rafael on and off for 40 years. Either as a staff person or a planner, and I've always been really kind of cynical about the fact that you get outside of San Rafael and these other communities don't do their part, and it really concerns me that it's fine and dandy for us to put homeless housing at 3301 Kerner, but You can't put it in Novato or Corte Madera or Sausalito or any other place where you do have a concentrated homeless population. So, but there's not, I can say that there's nothing I can do about it. All I can say is we can do the best we can for San Rafael.
I have a question kind of piggybacking off of what Bill was saying about kind of that long-term planning with sea level rise, planning that kind of together with the PDA. And I mean, granted, I don't work in government very often, so 5 years from now seems like a very long time to have that planning completed. And if it takes 5 years to plan it and then another number of years to implement the plans both in the PDA and in the sea level rise adaptation, how does that do any good for that community that is going to be facing sea level rise in the next 3 to 5 years? How do we actually make this PDA work sooner, hopefully, or make it more effective? Because in that timeline seems unrealistic with the issues that we're facing.
No, I totally agree, and it is a tall order, but I think we're starting where we need to start. And the best thing we can do is just move forward. My suggestion is when we move forward with the general plan, the city council is going to be put in the position to have to prioritize the programs in the general plan. What are the most important ones? And the one that I see that's probably the most important right now in our community is adaptation planning for sea level rise. Because you can do a specific plan for the Southeast San Rafael area and plan for land use. But if you're not planning for sea level rise, then it seems to be kind of futile. And you got to get those, those issues in order. And so I think it's real important to keep that in mind because the city council is going to have to prioritize these programs. And the sooner it started.
Well, then maybe a plug to our fellow members, that's something that we consider writing to council about priorities that we would ask them to take up first.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's a far bigger issue than just for Southeast San Rafael. It's Eastern San Rafael. It's the area down towards Gerstle Park. I mean, there's the impact of sea level rise on San Rafael is huge.
And wildfire risk, obviously, too. I know that's looked at by other agencies, but yeah, I think that could be an opportunity for us.
I'm gonna, I think, have to move on to other items at this point. I would just call to everybody's attention that, as noted by a later agenda item, we will probably be focusing on the Canal area in our January meeting, and sea level rise might be a part of it. Economic distress might be a part of it. Housing might be a part of it, but certainly those issues will be dealt with in January, or at least we will begin to see how we might deal with them. Unless anybody feels differently, thanks to Paul for a very informative presentation. This agenda item, unlike some of our items, is not action oriented, but it was education oriented. I think we have Katie to thank for saying that she wanted to understand a lot more about PDAs, and I feel a lot better informed at this point. You probably do too, Katie. Unless there's anything else that's really urgent, I think we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Paul, you can stick around if you want, but you probably want to just go back home.
I think he is home.
I'm going to stick around for a few minutes because I've been working with Simon and Danielle on the 1001 4th Street project negotiations with Goldstone. So I'll be on the sidelines here. I think I'm going to turn my camera off though.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right,
Paul.
so we're moving on to the next item.
Danielle is here waiting for you.
Yeah, I know she is. So we're going to move to it right away. I'm the troublemaker on this. I really insisted on having this come up as an item because I'm puzzled about a lot of things here and ignorant of some of the moving parts. So with nothing further, I'll just let Danielle take control of the meeting.
Hello, hi CAC. It's nice to see all of you. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. I'm here tonight to share some small updates. I wish I had bigger updates to share with you on the Goldstone project, but the Goldstone project is 1001 4th Street, and Paul Goldstone is the developer who owns this downtown parcel. He's also purchased the beauty salon space right next to it, as well as the dry cleaners behind on 3rd Street. So he owns 3 parcels. And he had approached the city to discuss possibly purchasing our parking garage, replacing the parking garage, and doing a bigger development project. To date, nothing formally has been submitted, so we don't have a number of how many units. We've heard up to 200 units, but until you really see something written down, it's just conjecture, but that is what we've heard. So over the course of many months, the Goldstone development team, which consists of Paul Goldstone, his commercial broker, Eric Hausch, his architect, Michael Zucker, and a gentleman from Abrams Parking, have been meeting with the city's team, which includes myself, Simon, Paul Jensen, and then we bring in special teams depending on what the topic is. Sometimes we have Rafat Ray from Public Works talking about traffic, Jim Myers talking about parking. So when we constructed the E&A agreement, the goal was really to first find out if what was being proposed, an automated parking garage, would be feasible on this site. And the city has created a smaller group focused on meeting to discuss how that would look. Who would operate the garage? How would we have the public spaces identified, saved, and accessed, parking rates and fees? And to date, everything has just been discussions and conversations. Nothing really formally has been submitted to a parking consultant for review. Ideally, when we were moving through this process, we were supposed to have the parking plan first and deem if that was feasible or not, and then proceed with an appraisal and some of the other development steps that come after. The developer, Paul Goldstone, has asked that we conduct an appraisal before he submits a parking plan for the city to review. So we are currently working to procure an appraisal. We have a team identified. We think an appraisal will probably happen in the next 6 weeks. And then at that point, Paul Goldstone's going to have a value range to consider in his project and decide if he's going to put forward a substantive parking proposal along with more details and specificity around how many units and what this project looks like. Now, there's a residential component, and then there's also a commercial ground floor component. We've heard interest from him in having a market hall, but these were all discussions that happened pre-COVID, and I'm not sure how COVID changes what type of development he's looking at, if a market hall will still be what he pursues or some other combination. But for now, what we know is he's still interested in pursuing a market hall and reorienting the building to activate Lawrence Way and create a nice plaza connection from Court Street through Lawrence Way to BioMarin. And he has been in some, I think, cursory discussions with BioMarin about what that could look like, but we haven't seen any drawings or project details to really know much more than that. And so that's where we're at, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Okay, maybe I lost my place, but an appraisal, talking about an appraisal, is the question what the value of the garage is? Is that what's being appraised?
Yes. And the factors that would go into that appraisal of what the value of that land would be is dependent upon what is zoning wise allowed. So if we conduct an appraisal now, under the current zoning regulations, you're probably going to get a value. And then if we conduct an appraisal once the downtown precise plan is approved, there will be certain development allowances there that are different that might drive a different value.
So why did the city agree to do the appraisal before a plan was submitted?
The developer was just not going to submit anything and the deal would have dissolved. And so we would have no opportunity at development. What we did do is decide to do, it's a lack of a better term, but a windshield appraisal. So it's not as in-depth and expensive as what the formal appraisal will be when we start, negotiations, but it gives the developer a ballpark range to know, okay, I can expect maybe low amount, high amount, somewhere in there. And then he can start building out his pro forma as he submits his project to us. And so as a city, we really want to see this project happen, and we didn't want that to be the thing that stops it. So that's why we continued.
But on what basis is the appraisal going to be conducted? I mean, highest and best use, what are the assumptions that are going to go into it from a planning perspective?
Glenn, those are good questions. I have those details coming to me. We're still researching it, but it's going to be a value range of what the land is worth with what possibilities can be built there. And I think they're going to look at what we currently allow there, and then they're going to factor in some options under the precise plan possibly, and it's just going to be a range. It's not going to be very detailed. They're not going to have deep, thorough comps from other properties.
Mhm.
And this appraisal can't be used for a bank loan or anything like that. It's really just for the developer to get kind of a number for their own pro forma analysis. So when I say windshield or appraisal light, it really is a pretty light-based range, not the detail we would need when we finally get to a development and disposition agreement.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
And
is the developer reimbursing the city for all the staff time?
yes, and the developer is paying for this appraisal.
Is the appraisal required for the city to propose a sale? In other words, I have a notion, but it may be wrong, that a city cannot go ahead with a major sale like this without going through the appraisal process, even if the purchaser / developer were not asking for it.
I believe it is a part of the requirement. I would need to just double check with our legal team, but I believe it is a requirement. Why we were positioning that to come later was that if this large scale automated parking garage wasn't going to work, then we didn't want to waste the money, the developer's money, on an appraisal. And we were clear with that, and the developer appreciated that, but he did still choose to say, I want to put my money into having a number. This is really going to be what makes or breaks it for me mentally, to be able to invest in submitting parking drawings and more plans. Like if we were so different and far away on a number, that might be where they say thanks, but no thanks. So
is the developer saying that he really doesn't want to go ahead with doing anything unless he can, number one, acquire the existing garage, and number two, convert it to whatever an automated garage means? I think I've heard about elevators and that sort of thing, elevators for cars and that sort of thing.
yeah, he will have a project with or without our garage. The scope of the project will change, but he's going to develop those properties. What I've understood from our conversations with him is the scope and scale will be much smaller. But again, I haven't seen anything, so I can only go on kind of the conceptual and the surveys where they talked about a market hall and, activating the site, commercially speaking. The units I've heard up to 200, but until we see some type of like formal paper submitted, we don't know.
This may be an unfair question, but if you have a situation, and I'm not saying this is necessarily exactly the situation, but if you have a situation where a developer is just sitting on a piece of property, and meanwhile it's an eyesore, and the city would really like to see a proposal go forward, what tools or techniques does the city have to encourage a developer to move forward instead of just leaving a property as it is, which is unsatisfactory, with development. And I realize the answer to this may be different in a normal environment than it is now in COVID, but COVID will be over at some point. And to be blunt, what I'm asking is, if a developer is just dragging their feet and the property is just sitting there and it really should be developed, and if a city wanted to figuratively kind of give the developer a boot in the rear and say, come on, go ahead and submit something, what tools does the city have? I know that in San Francisco, in a slightly different context, they had the notion of imposing a tax on vacancies. And I'm not by any means suggesting that's appropriate here, but if the developer really should be moving forward with some kind of a more concrete plan, how can the city encourage or motivate them to do so?
I think a lot of it boils down to relationships personally, and constantly keeping the communication lines open and talking about what are the barriers to getting the parcel developed. As far as San Francisco and a tax, any type of tax would have to go to the voters. And so that would be multiple steps before we get there. I think from like a, more of a stick perspective, you could have code enforcement if there's code enforcement issues and have sightings that way. But other than that, as long as the property tax is being paid and they're meeting their mortgage obligations, there's not much that, in my view and understanding, the city can do.
By the way, I don't want to be misunderstood. I was not proposing anything like a vacancy tax.
No.
That would be a terrible idea.
Well, I think there's another way to view this. Actually, at my vantage point, from where I sit, having done development, having owned buildings, I think the city is being incredibly flexible. Frankly, this guy came to us with a plan months ago. It was very pretty pictures. I frankly thought there was a specific concept, much more specific than Danielle's describing, concept that would induce the city to work with him. But so far, it sounds like he's getting his way completely to me. We're spending all this time and energy, and he's not even provided drawings saying, here's, if I have the parking lot, here's my proposal right now based on COVID and whatever retail analysis he's doing. And here's, if I don't have the parking lot, here's the alternative plan. And, it would be plus or minus and not a precise.
Yeah. He is paying
proposal,
staff
but
time.
we're sitting here screwing around with this guy. Frankly, I think the city's doing what it can. What Danielle's describing is a city that's doing everything it can to keep the deal alive.
And he is paying staff time, and he is paying for the appraisal.
Well, he also owns these properties. He's in this deal. I mean,
there's no doubt about that.
So he's paying his mortgage, he's paying his property taxes, he's paying maintenance to keep the roof up.
Yeah.
So, somewhere he's got some motivation to do something. So, he's not going to walk away and do nothing because he can't. Well, I don't know, unless who knows, developers do vary.
My sense is he's getting to the point now where there were a lot of delegates on his behalf that were meeting. And I think in the beginning that added to some of the confusion of the dance. And then now it's much more direct with him of here's where he's at, here's what he needs. This is what he needs, or he's going to walk, and he will still do a project. It just won't include the garage. And so we didn't want to see it completely evaporate over the appraisal that he did offer to pay. Caveat being that we're going to have to do another appraisal, later on in the process. And he understands that. So it was really just paramount to keep the deal alive because it's such a pivotal space in our downtown. And it could be such a great project either way, with or without our garage.
And Joe and Dirk may have a different view on this, but I think the market hall concept, I can't imagine anybody doing that right now. So, I don't know what he's thinking, but it would scare me to introduce that much new retail into downtown San Rafael.
Yeah, I think to chime in a little bit, we all knew that was proposed, before the pandemic, and it's been floated around ever since. The developer has requested flexibility about what that project ultimately will entail. Obviously, as Paul will let you know that we have to go through the entitlement process either way. But it is currently the proposal. We don't know if it's going to be exactly still a market hall. Like Roger has mentioned, it may not be something people are interested in right now, but I think that's still to be determined.
Danielle, have you seen the results of the surveys?
I have, yeah.
Is that something you can share or discuss?
I could definitely share that with you. I need to go back. It's been quite some time, but there was a lot of support for the market hall and housing and really activating the site. They did 2 rounds of surveys. So that's something, let me dig into my files and get that. But most people were pretty supportive. They felt like seeing that site activated was a really big deal for our downtown, and that in its absence, it's kind of a dark, unsafe feeling of an area, that people are open to investment there. And I didn't get much pushback on the market hall concept. Everybody seemed to like it, but that was 8 months ago.
Right.
And it feels like we're in a different world now. And I just, to Roger's point, I don't see how that would be feasible. So
It's not a matter of what people like or don't like. It's a matter of what can be done. I mean,
yeah,
with market conditions being what they are.
exactly.
Danielle, how's
Hey, Jeff.
what is the developer expressed in regards to the affordable housing component of the project? And has that been a part of the negotiation on what percentage they'll be providing?
All I know is that they're closely following the council discussion, but we've not been given any number. We don't even know the number of units, but I do know in kind of like passing and in meetings, they'll allude to the discussion that we're having around our affordable housing requirement, and they're paying attention, but there's not been any direct request. Everything has just been about the garage, the parking rates, and the parking ratios. So really like down in the weeds about just the parking.
Well,
That's what we're selling.
Yeah.
That's what we're selling is the parking. And that's why it is, we don't have, he owns the other properties. We own the parking lot.
Correct.
So isn't this appraisal going to have to be in alternatives? I mean, depending on how it gets built and operated, if it's public-private kind of thing, or segregated, so it's a condominium kind of deal or something like that. It would seem to me that without knowing how it's going to end up, you're going to have to put together an appraisal that makes a bunch of different assumptions going in different directions. And if this is possible, then it's going to be valued at this. And if this is possible or worked out, it's at that. If it's just air rights, it's this. If it's fee and then lease back, it's that. I mean,
that's why we wanted those details. And so that's really in the more extensive appraisal that we're talking about a much greater cost and time. This is just a range, and it can't really be used for anything but a starting number for them. And he was good with that. And we went round and round with that for 2 months. And it was really the make or break for him. So we wanted to keep the deal alive. And so we said, okay.
So Danielle, could you talk, speak
Hi,
a little
Bill.
bit? Hi, could you speak a little bit to the city's objectives from this deal? And let me lead the witness here a little bit. I mean, it seems to me the city clearly wants parking, wants a new parking garage out of this, and they have a substandard parking garage is my understanding, and this is a chance to revitalize that. So that's an objective for the city. And I think Joe raises the other point, which is, if you're selling this piece of property or leasing it or whatever the deal is, that you want another potential value that the city could receive back is more affordable housing on the site than would otherwise be achievable. So if there was after the garage was built, there was some value still left on that property, that maybe that gets translated into increased units of affordable housing rather than, coming back to the general fund or something. So I'm wondering if that sort of contour of negotiating points is what, the city is after here. And then one specific question on the garage. It seems to me that, people want to park their car in the garage, get out and walk and buy something and come back. They don't want to deal with elevators and all that kind of stuff. If you've got a unit up there, fine. Or if you're staying all day downtown, fine. But for the sort of thing that this space lends itself to, of parking to support retail activity on 4th Street, you want that kind of flexibility. So I keep hearing about, yeah, he's tied to this mechanical thing. Can't the city negotiate to have at least the ground floor be regular, in and out parking, and then have the mechanical stuff above that?
I would say that, our deal points or goals, obviously we want to see affordable units. Obviously we want to see housing downtown. We would love to have a nicer parking garage. Is that our driving goal? Is the parking garage replacement? No, it's a catalytic, development in downtown. Why we want to see a parking plan is we're not sure how the elevator will work in our downtown core and if it will work with the uses. We have gone and visited other places in Oakland and seen it. But we really don't know until he shows us what he's proposing. And then we can start having those discussions like, is there a possibility to have some street frontage parking? We don't know until we get something. All we know is we've heard automated and we have no drawings. We have no understanding of how the space will work at all yet.
And just to add to that, Bill, we've been meeting as a parking subgroup to particularly answer these questions. The city has also very large concerns about whether users of downtown, who are going in and out, will want to use an automated garage facility when they're not familiar with it. So we obviously have the same idea. We don't want it to be a barrier for visitors of downtown. We don't even know what the 3 or 4 levels of parking and the project look like. We don't have elevations, we don't have plans. And I think that was the primary purpose, to kind of figure out ahead of time. The developer has, recently just focused on the appraisal, whereas we were focused on the parking, and it's created this kind of sticking point. So I think thankfully just, the past few days, we've been able to get past it. So we can appease the developer by getting the appraisal, and we can still continue working on the parking question. It's an ongoing situation where we need more detail as much as possible. Our engineers and our coworkers at community development have the same concerns that you do.
Now, my question would be, what other cities the size of San Rafael have this kind of automated parking? I mean, I see it in big major cities. I've not seen it anywhere in essentially a much smaller city like ours. Do you have any sense of that, Simon or Danielle?
So the most comparable example is West Hollywood. So the automated parking garage vendor, they are currently Utron, that's their name. They have a facility in West Hollywood, and that's the closest example that we have. There is no other city that we know of that has a similar facility. And in other cities I work for, it's been proposed, maybe once every couple of years. For one reason or the other, it eventually just doesn't get built. So there are challenges because it is new and we're not familiar with it. But we do know that there is a similar facility in Oakland by a different vendor called City Lift that I have visited myself. And that works because it's probably a more urban environment. San Rafael is not the urban environment that we come to know up in the Bay Area. It's a pretty small city. So we've been asking if there's any other comparable examples they could provide. We've asked our parking consultant as well, and they're kind of at a loss. There really isn't any other one.
Is there any way to find out how the existing ones are being used? That I mean, what we're talking about is a fear that it might turn off the citizenry How's it been received? Do we know by, by those people who use the ones that are there?
So we are working with our parking division manager, Jim Myers. He's also familiar with staff person at West Hollywood. So they're in talks right now to discuss really the logistics of how that parking facility has operated, how it's worked, what hasn't worked. We have heard in passing that, it might be great for, City Hall users, because it is part of, I think, City Hall parking down there. If they're parking long-term, it's convenient. But there's been questions about, well, what's the operational efficiency of that garage? These are the questions that we're really interested in. It's still a work in progress. We're trying to get that information as soon as we can so that we can kind of resolve some of the pain points that they might have.
I think we ought to bring the focus back to what our concern is why does it appear that nothing is going on? I think the details of the parking, I mean, as Simon points out, there's not enough information to really even discuss this in any great detail now, and there's no point in it, because this may never come to fruition at all. What we really are hearing, I think, is that we've got a developer who's, taking his time. He owns these properties. That's the only leverage we have on him, in that he can't easily go away. He'd have to sell the property to some other developer who might pick up the ball and do something completely different. But our question really should be, is the city doing what it can to make this happen? Because we all want it to happen. From what I'm hearing, we don't have much choice, and you can't force the guy to build something. What will force him is economic necessity. He owns these properties. Presumably, he's not going to sit on them forever. They're vacant for the most part. I think are they all vacant? I mean, I don't know about him, but that would be a tough nut to carry every month. And it's an opportunity cost if nothing else. So there's some motivation built in. We have that leverage, but that's all we've got. And right now, in the middle of a huge recession and a retail downturn that predates and will post-date the recession, I don't think we can do much, because I don't know what an alternative developer would do. Maybe try to imagine a project on that site that makes any economic sense of all. I mean, we've got.
Well, what about the last project proposed with the Lennar? Wasn't it similar in terms of how they?
Similar, and it might have, maybe looking back, we should have done more. Who knows? But you can't, But so you might go to another developer. But these are incredibly complicated. This is an incredibly complicated. Yeah. That's the other thing to remember. So I think, again, I just want to keep the CAC on focus to what we're really trying to understand is what's going on there. Why can't we get a project going? And I think I think San Rafael just doesn't have many choices here.
Well, I think the concern that I have, or not a concern necessarily, but a comment or a thought is, so we have this piece of property that this developer wants. He's probably going to develop something. We don't have any idea what he wants to develop one way or the other, whether he gets it or not. And we are, obviously eager to get something developed. We all would like that, both as a community, as a city, all of it. But if we can tie what we're selling, if we can tie the process of selling this garage to some tangible housing units, some affordable units, extremely low income units that we need, et cetera, that I think would be a really good goal for the city, because without really understanding what he wants to build or how many units could be facilitated or that he would even attempt to submit for approval, it feels a little bit like we're kind of, yes, we can preserve some parking spaces and such, but what else are we getting as a city, and how can we leverage, the little bit of leverage that we have to not just maintain parking spaces, but also try to get housing units?
Well, I think those housing units is a big win in themselves, because it brings people right downtown for all the retail. So
absolutely.
I mean, this is a case of where you can't really, affordable housing is wonderful, but we don't have any leverage. This project obviously is marginal, or he'd be a lot more aggressive about it, right? He'd be wanting to do it. Making demands on affordability right now would be counterproductive to getting it. It's much more important to have a project let alone an affordable project.
Well, I agree that it's important to have a project, but if we understand that, okay, without the garage, he's only proposing 50 units, but with the garage, his proposal is 150, that would add even more value to the city wanting to sell the garage. So to not have an understanding of what number of units, forget the affordability piece for a minute, but what number of units are we going to get downtown? Is it going to be, something that we want to continue to extend this negotiating agreement for? Is it that valuable, or is it something where we just have to say, you know what, this isn't going to work at some point? Like, it's been, almost 2 years. So I don't know, it seems like we need some concrete something from the developer before any decisions are made. But I think that the number of units to be built would be an important decision, an important factor in the decision for the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we're kind of starved for information. And in absence of information, we didn't want the entire possibility to die. So that's why we're doing this piece. And really because he's also paying for that piece.
Absolutely.
If he expected the city based on our budget situation right now, I don't think we could even be doing this. And we really did try to convince them that this was too soon to be doing this one piece. Like, give us something to evaluate, and then we can move into those next pieces. But that was not going to happen for him. So
no, I think it makes sense too. He needs to understand what the parking structure is going to cost, et cetera, to be able to say, okay, great, I can get 100 units, to support that parking structure, whatever it is. But I think for the final decision, we need to actually understand how many units downtown, and
absolutely.
If we have any leverage to push more affordability, that would obviously be a great opportunity too.
Yeah.
We're not in a position of deciding on units because we haven't got that far. And the economy is not lending itself to it. What units we do get, and if he builds what he originally said, it would be a goodly number. We need it to be an economic engine for that part of the community. So if, I hate to say this, but if you put low income, they're not going to buy much. But if you put higher income, you're going to have more purchasing power in the center of town.
There is an optimistic view, the fact that this is taking so long drags us through this recession. By the time, an appraisal today may not be the same appraisal 2 years from now. And there will be another appraisal, because this appraisal can't possibly mean much because there's so many assumptions.
Correct.
It's just this is
correct.
What a nightmare of an appraisal. I'm glad I'm not the appraiser. So it might work out in the long run to our benefit. If the economy improves, we can do more, get more, and pay for more. So
yeah.
Danielle, where going to come back with an extremely wide range of value based on the assumptions. I mean, it could be anywhere from X to 5 or 10X.
That's his problem, though.
I think there
that's
are.
what he's paying for. What the hell?
Yeah.
No, it's a way to buy time, really, for him and for the city until the pandemic ends, and because probably nothing much is going to happen until that point anyway.
Yeah. Where does the exclusive negotiating agreement, which is expiring right about now, where does the extension of that stand?
So I believe, Simon, it's December 7th it would expire, right?
Yes, so it expire on Monday. We have the option to extend it administratively through the city manager for up to 90 days. It is currently under review. If he signs and approves the administrative extension, we have until March 6, 2021 to continue negotiations. We could still extend it again, but that would have to go back to city council. It wouldn't be able to be done at staff or at city manager level. So that's where we are now.
And just for clarification, the subject of that, the exclusive negotiating, is specifically with regard to purchase of the garage as distinguished from negotiating other issues?
It's specifically geared towards deeming feasibility of their garage proposal. The purchase, the automated, his parking plan. everything nests in that decision, because if for whatever reason, our city team and our parking consultant look at it and go, that's not going to work, then there's no more work on it and it stops there. They may
he
say
does-
this works.
And if he does, if the price is right and he does buy the garage, then he's going to own the garage as distinguished from it being a public-private joint venture. Is that right?
No, what he would be doing is we'd be deeming that what he's proposing is feasible, and then it would kick it into developing a development and disposition agreement that would lay out term sheets and all sorts of details. This one piece is just clearly focused on, is what he's saying he's gonna do, does that actually work? You know, it's a large automated garage. We don't know how many units, we don't know what he's trying to park. Is what he's proposing to do there feasible? And if it is, it kicks it into, let's talk about how much it would be, what you're gonna do there, the development timeline, that would be a whole other piece.
I haven't
that's
heard
where you
anybody
would-
talk about a DDA in years. You know, we're
Yeah.
going to have to wrap up this segment.
Could I
Danielle,
just-
thank you very much.
Could I,
Um,
Bill, could I?
yeah.
pose
Oh, I'm
an-
sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Right, just one thing. I mean, it seems to me that the sale of the garage and the development of this parcel may end up being linked. We hope they will be, but it's certainly not a necessity. And so I'm wondering whether the city has looked at, and I would propose it to do, consider, you know, putting the garage out for RFPs or whatever, you know, to get in, put it on the street basically to identify what the city would like out of it and to see if that's a viable deal. Obviously, you'd want to understand whether it's feasible or not before you put it on the street.
Sure.
But you can separate this out, and if that's the next step, you know, this exclusive negotiations expires, then you turn around and say, okay, we've got this property, we've got this need for parking, we've got this need for housing and the air rights. Is there a package here that this valuable asset in downtown San Rafael could be sold for?
Yeah, I agree.
I
Bill,
think,
Bill, go ahead. I just like, I have a kind of a question, and I just want to use it as a way to just make sure we're on the same page before we end this topic. Is that there's been discourse as we kind of get excited about in here about, you know, the developer versus the city and, like, you know, getting them to do this and that. Can you share, is the general vibe of the negotiation, is this an amicable one or is this an adversarial one? Because I think it's important for us to know, like, are the parties working together and maybe there's sticking points, or is it really an us versus them kind of thing? Because it seems like it's more of a working together over time kind of thing, but it would be great to
Yeah.
just hear that so we can be on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an insightful question. And I would say it's a working together. One, that's my personality and everyone on our team's personality. We want to make our downtown a very, you know, diverse and vibrant place. And so we want to work with anybody who is a vested party, which they own a substantial amount of parcels they've assembled. And so we definitely come to it from a, let's see what we can do. But we also are realistic with, like, we need more details to be able to give meaningful feedback. And that's where, if there was a struggle, it is in that piece.
Mhm.
And so that's where the appraisal is hopefully going to remove that struggle so that the information can flow. That's what we hope.
Thank you.
I only wanted to
Yeah.
add, that I think the CAC, I will speak for myself. I can't speak for the CAC. I think I'm generally supportive of what I heard tonight. I mean, I got the background that we need. I don't think there are a lot of options for us right now. I mean, in a year that might be different. But right now, you got to play the game the developers playing. We really don't have any choices that make any sense. I mean, we can fold up our tent and say, screw you, but that's not going to get us anywhere. If this guy is actively spending money on the project and moving and providing the city with something, you know, he's paying for appraisals, he's doing these things, those are signs of serious intent.
Yeah.
That'll have to be the last word. Thank you very much, Danielle.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank
Danielle.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Danielle.
everybody. It was nice seeing you.
Thanks, Danielle.
Good to see
Thank
you.
guys.
I second.
Well, we have two items. Let me just speak quickly to item number 7. As we discussed back when Joanne Webster was with us, I think we have a consensus that we should address the Canal area, and in some way that will appear on the January agenda. I don't know Omar Carrara. Maybe some of the others of you do. If you do, please contact me, because it seems to me that we should invite him, because instead of us thinking about what should be done with regard to the area that he's so deeply involved in, we ought to listen to him first. And another thing that I want to put, and I think I circulated a memo about this, another thing that I want to put on the agenda on January is just an initial look at sort of a mission statement or statement of purpose for the CAC. To be blunt about it, we have wonderful discussions. Do we accomplish anything? What's our role? Should that change in any way? I think it's an appropriate time to talk about those things, particularly with a new administration coming into city government. So that's all I wanted to say about future agenda, specifically January agenda items. With regard to the election of officers, I was stumbling around on the city website and found the CAC bylaws that basically say the election is to be held in January rather than December. So it's convenient to put that off anyway, because we don't have much time left, but I think we have to do that. Simon, I was confused by the city clerk's response when I pointed that out. What is the position? I mean, I assume it cannot go ahead because there's a document that says the election should be in January.
Well, the first meeting of the year, I believe there was another document circulating that said the last meeting of the year. So really, it's just waiting another month.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Well, you know, the one that's on the city website, I think, has to be honored.
Yeah.
If there is, as there appears to be an ambiguity.
I do want to remind everyone that we do have the precise plan on January as well.
Yes.
So I will confirm with Barry again, and then that should be what we should expect in January.
By the way, one last quick thing is I looked at that link that Paul Jensen gave us with the Q&As and FAQs, et cetera, on PDAs. How's that for acronyms in one sentence? And I would encourage anybody who still has questions or lack of clarity about it to click on that website, and it's very helpful in understanding PDAs. Do I hear a motion?
I second it.
I think we're adjourned.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Have a
Happy
good
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Happy
holidays.